In this video, we're going to go over a few more elements of diagramming sentences, some that start to get a little bit more complex. In this first page, we're going over reflexive and intensive pronouns, which 6th graders learn about in lesson 62, and 7th graders learn about in lesson 60. These are pronouns. Pronouns, like nouns, are always diagrammed on some sort of horizontal line. If it is a reflexive pronoun, it's just going to appear wherever in the sentence it belongs. It may be the subject, the direct object, the indirect object, object of the preposition. However, an intensive pronoun is not grammatically needed for the sentence, so it goes in parentheses after the noun or pronoun that it's emphasizing. It's easiest when we see this in a sentence. So let's look at this first sentence. The students hiked the trail themselves. Our sentence without the word themselves says the students hiked the trail. We don't need the word themselves to understand what's happening in the sentence. The students hiked the trail. Themselves just adds emphasis to the word students. The students themselves hiked the trail. Our verb is hiked, that's what they did, and students is our subject. Students goes on the left, but in this case, this word themselves adds emphasis to that subject, the students themselves. So we put it in parentheses after the word students. And then we divide our subject from our predicate. Hiked is our verb. It is an action verb. We say the students hiked what? They hiked the trail. So we have trail as our direct object. Then we have the describing the students. It's not the themselves, the students, and the trail. So in this sentence, this is an intensive pronoun. It's only there to add intensity, but it's not needed grammatically for the sentence, so it doesn't appear on its own separate line. This sentence looks very similar, but it's a different kind of pronoun. In this sentence, it says the students hiked the trail by themselves. We have this word by, which is a preposition, so themselves is an object of the preposition. If you left this out, you'd get the students hiked the trail by. That would be an incomplete sentence. This is a reflexive pronoun instead of an intensive pronoun, so it is diagrammed differently. Now let's compare this sentence to our original sentence. The students hiked the trail by themselves. This sentence is very similar to that first sentence, but in this sentence we have a reflexive pronoun. It is needed for this sentence. If we left themselves out of the sentence, we'd have the students hiked the trail by. We don't have an object of that preposition. By is a preposition. Without the word themselves, our sentence wouldn't make sense. Up here, our sentence still makes sense without the word themselves. The students hiked the trail. Down here, this is a reflexive pronoun because it's essential to the meaning of the sentence. So to diagram this one, we again have students hiked, our subject and our verb. They hiked the trail, our direct object. And then we have the describing the students and the describing trail. Now we have by themselves. By themselves tells you how they hiked. We haven't technically learned about prepositional phrases that go under verbs, because those would be called adverb phrases, but I want you to see how it compares to this sentence above. So by themselves is a prepositional phrase. So we would diagram it just like we would diagram a normal prepositional phrase. Notice nothing goes in parentheses. This is an essential element. Up here, themselves is in parentheses because it's not essential to the sentence. It's just adding emphasis to the word students. Let's look at two more examples. Grant bought himself a snack. If we have our verb, bought, we see Grant did that action, so Grant is our subject. And then he bought what? He bought a snack. Now we see he bought himself a snack. Himself tells you who he bought the snack for. If we took it out, the sentence would still make sense. Grant bought a snack, but we wouldn't have the whole meaning. We wouldn't know who he bought the snack for. He could have bought it for Sally or Joe. Grant bought Joe a snack, but here it says he bought himself a snack. So this is a reflexive pronoun that is an indirect object. He bought it for himself, as opposed to buying it for anyone else. In this sentence, we see himself as an intensive pronoun. Grant himself bought a snack. It's not answering who he even bought the snack for, it's just explaining that he bought it himself. He did it all by himself. So in this case, we'd have Grant, and then in parentheses himself, adding emphasis to this subject. Bought is again our verb, and snack is again our direct object. But in this case, it doesn't actually say who he bought the snack for, so there's no indirect object. It's just emphasizing that he bought the snack. Well, that's the difference between an intensive pronoun down here and a reflexive pronoun here. Now this next lesson, this next page, is about diagramming compound sentences. Compound sentences are very easy to diagram. A compound sentence is a sentence made up of more than one independent clause. An independent clause is simply a simple sentence. Everything you have diagrammed up to this point is a sentence. All you're doing now is diagramming two of them at once. So to see if you have a compound sentence, you look to see if you have two complete thoughts on either side of your conjunction. If we look at this first sentence here, we look for two clauses which each have a subject and a verb. Plato taught Aristotle. That is a simple sentence. It has a subject and a verb. And then this, Plato himself was a student of Socrates. That's also a simple sentence. Each of those you already know how to diagram by themselves. So all you're doing now is diagramming one above the other and placing your conjunction off to the left. But each of those clauses are diagrammed as you already know how to do. So let's diagram this sentence. We always do the first clause above and the second clause below. Our first clause, Plato taught Aristotle. Plato is our subject. Taught is our verb. He taught who? He taught Aristotle, our direct object. That's our diagram of that first clause. Our second clause, we leave some space and we diagram that. Plato himself was a student of Socrates. Was is our linking verb. Plato is the subject. And we have one of those intensive pronouns here. Plato himself was a student. We place Plato here as the subject with himself in parentheses. Was is our linking verb. And we see we have student here, a predicate nominative. Student and Plato are the same person. We put that slanted line for predicate nominatives, and we place student on the right. And then we add a describing student and of Socrates describing student. We have diagrammed each of those independently. You could have already done that part. Now all we do is we take that conjunction, in this case the word but, and connect the entire clause together. Always place it on the far left at the start of each sentence, and then you place the conjunction on the dotted line. So you take one clause on top, one clause on the bottom, and then you connect them on the left with the conjunction. That is the only one we're going over on this page, because again, you already know how to diagram each of those clauses. You're simply putting two together into one diagram. Now, this lesson is about adverbs and adverb phrases. This is not taught until lesson 87 and 95 in 6th grade, and lesson 86 and 94 in 7th grade. Adverb diagramming is taught first, and then later adverb prepositional phrases are added on. They function just like adjectives and adjective prepositional phrases. They just describe different things, and they get a little bit more complicated. So adjectives describe nouns and pronouns. Adverbs describe verbs, adjectives, or another adverb. If it's describing a verb, it's going to look just like our adjectives and our adjective prepositional phrases because you have them coming off of these horizontal lines. But when you have something describing an adjective or adverb, it's going to look different because you're having to draw a line off of a line that's already at an angle. So we can't simply draw a line this way. We always want our descriptive words going down from left to right. So to have something else describing it, we have to add this shape here to show that it's describing that word. Let's look at this first sentence. The students admired the incredibly unique architecture. First, we always find that subject and verb. In this case, students admired. Admired is an action verb, so we say the students admired what? In this case, we have the direct object architecture. And there's the core elements of our sentence. Now we have all those descriptive words, both adjectives and adverbs. The is an adjective. We've been doing those for a long time. Here we have unique is also an adjective describing architecture, and the is an adjective describing architecture. So we have the on one line and unique on another line. Now we have incredibly. Incredibly is not describing the architecture. You could have incredible architecture, but you wouldn't have incredibly architecture. Instead, incredibly is telling you how unique. In order to show that it is describing unique, we draw our line to the left and then draw our adverb on this slanted line like so. And we place incredibly here. So that's the only new element in that sentence, is our adverb incredibly, describing how unique the architecture was. Now let's look at this sentence here. After school, George kindly walked his sister home. Again, our subject and verb is what we find first. George walked. In this case, it's using walked to mean escorted. He escorted his sister home. So George walked what? He walked his sister. He escorted his sister. So sister would be the direct object. It may sound a little weird to say he walked his sister, but if we think about the meaning of the sentence, that is who he is walking. He is walking her. He is escorting her home. So there's our subject, our verb, and our direct object. Now let's look at all our other words. After school tells us when he walked her home. So when tells us when about the verb walked. That would mean after school is a prepositional phrase underneath the verb walked. Then let's look at this word kindly. Kindly describes the manner in which he walked. He was kind to her. He walked her kindly. We're running out of space here. And then we have this word home. Home sounds like it should be a noun, but in this case it's answering the question where. He walked where? He walked home. So home is actually an adverb describing walked. It tells you where he walked. And then we add our adjective his under sister. So these words are all adjectives or adjective phrases. After school tells you when this happened. Kindly tells you how he walked, and home tells you where he walked. And let's look at one more sentence. She ran unusually quickly for her age. Our sentence begins with our subject and our verb, she ran. And then we look, ran as is an action verb, so we look for a direct object. She ran what? There's nothing that answers that question. So we don't have a direct object in this sentence. Instead, all the other words describe the way in which she ran or some other descriptive element in this sentence. So she didn't run unusually, she ran quickly. Quickly is describing ran. Then, unusually tells you how quickly. It was unusually quickly. So we have another adverb describing the adverb quickly, unusually. And then we have this prepositional phrase, for her age. For her age is describing quickly. It was quickly for her age. It may not have been quickly in comparison to other people that are older, but for her age, she was quick. So we add this prepositional phrase for her age, describing the adverb quickly. To do that, we draw a line to the left, and then our preposition goes on our slanted line, for, and then we have age, our object of the preposition, and her, our adjective describing age. And that is our whole diagram.